again to Kelly for submitting this challenge for us. It's the third of the HR month series. So we'll start off with the monthly data this time. So this is the output from the previous week. So if you haven't done that, might be a nice idea to go back and try that one, but equally you can pick it up from here too. So we have our distribution centres and the months that each of those distribution centres worked, which employees worked there, and we have their hire date and their leave date as well as their age range. So basically the important fields for now, we want to calculate each employee's tenure in that month that they were working. So we want to calculate the difference between their hire date and their leave date, so how many full months have they worked. Although if they leave before the month end date in the status set, then obviously that's where we want that to go up to. So a few intricacies with calculating this. So for example, if we have a hire date that is, say, for example, let's use this as an example. So they got hired at the end of April, so therefore they haven't worked a full month until the end of May. So when they leave in November, just working out my months there, then they won't have worked a full month, October to November, because they'll only have worked those 8 days into the new month. So we need to make sure we're accounting for that. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to do a couple of different date diffs initially. So we'll check if the leave date is null, then that's our easy situation. We just kind of leave that alone. We want to know the number of months between the hire date and the month end date, because it's always going to go up to the end of that next month. So they'll always have worked a full month up to the end of that month. So that's nice and simple. But it's if they have a leave date that becomes a little bit more tricky. So we want to, for now, we're just calculating it between the hire date and the leave date, and then we'll sort that out in a second calculation. So in the second calculation, we're just overwriting this tenure months field, and we're checking if the leave date is null. Again, we're just going to leave that alone. Leave it as what we've already calculated. But if it's not, if we have a leave date, then we want to check if the day of the leave date is less than the day of the hire date. So in that example earlier, we would get the 30 from the 30th of April when they were hired, and we would get the 8 from the 8th of November when they left. So because that 8 is less than the 30, then we would want to basically just minus 1 from their tenure months. So they haven't worked a full month in that time, so let's fix that there. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's just give you an example of a specific employee to check against if you're wondering if you got it right. So employee E00535 is one that I was looking at to check that this logic was working. So we can see their tenure in months here. It goes, as you would expect, up by 1 each row, but then when it gets to the final one, then it is staying at 6, because like we said, their leave date is the 8th of November rather than after the 30th of November, so they haven't actually been there a full month yet. So that's how we're dealing with that. So hopefully that makes sense, and you were able to get something similar, but it's something that I had to verify and cross-check with Kelly's solution a few times to make sure it was right too. And then once we've got our months, nice and simple to make sure that we can get our years, we just want to do a floor function around the months divided by 12. So nice and simple how we're getting that whole number there. So we can even kind of do a visual check. So 0, we'd expect to go up to 12 months. So that kind of looks like in these bins that's basically what's happening. I could expand it, in fact, to view that in more detail. So I would expect that to go 0 to 11. Of course, 0 to 11 rather than 0 to 12, and then 12 to 23, and then so on and so forth. So it looks like it's doing exactly what we want it to, that calculation. And our first part of the challenge is done at that point. We've worked out what the tenure is in terms of months and years. So that's great. Now we're coming on to the combination side of things. So we're using the employee data set that we've used in the previous challenge again. We're removing any fields that we're not going to use going forward. So we're basically only keeping the employee ID in order to do the join, the nationality, the gender, and the generation name. And then we're joining those two data sets on the employee ID. And for each of these dimensions, for generations, tenure years, gender, age range, and nationality, it's basically going to be the same thing that we're doing in each of these, so I won't go through all of them, but we're grouping by the distribution centre number, the month-end date, the generation name, and the employee ID. So we're counting, the distinct number of employee IDs at that point. So each time we'll only be replacing this field where it's the generation name or the age range or the tenure years, so on and so forth in each of the other aggregate steps, and then we're just going to rename. So demographic type for creating that to be like the generation name, or in terms of the tenure years, it'll be the tenure years, so on and so forth. Renaming the employee ID to employee count, or EE_count, and then updating the title of the generation name here to be the demographic detail. And that's the same thing that we do in each of those steps. So that when we come to union, they all just stack nicely on top of one another with the distribution centre number, the month-end date, demographic type, demographic detail, and EE count. We get rid of the table names as well at this step because that's not useful to us. Cool, so we're nearly there with this challenge, but we just need to make sure that we have those 0 rows in there as well. So if I don't have an employee who is between the ages of 20 to 24 in a particular month in a particular distribution centre, I want to know about that. So we're going to create all the different combinations, so basically doing all the different distribution numbers and all the different end dates, month end dates, and then all the different demographic types and demographic details there. Create a dummy field for them to join on, so this is literally just called dummy, it has a number 1 in it, and join those together on the dummy. So it took a little while for this to load the first time I did it because it's kind of exploding our data a lot from what it was before to the 15-odd thousand rows. So we do that, so we get all the different possible combinations, and then we join that back to the union step. On the distribution number, the month-end date, the demographic type, and the demographic detail. And we make sure that we keep in all the combinations, so make sure that we're including all these extra rows that don't exist at the moment, so we can make those values 0 in the E count, and get to this kind of exploded number of our data set. So again, that took a little while for it to run the first time that I was doing this, so don't worry if it takes a little while for you too. And then we just need to go and find our E count field that's here. All these null values we just want to replace with 0. So we can do that with an if null E count 0. We can just literally double click into the value of the nulls and replace it with a 0. We could do a ZN function. Lots of different ways to make sure that those nulls become zeros before we output our data, and then we're all done. So thank you very much to Kelly for this challenge, thank you very much to Victoria for validating it, and thanks to you for watching.